We're back. The Draft Rankings podcast. Cody Carpentier and Maddie Kiwoom here for a special edition. We talked about team building 101 last week. And this week we're going to dive deeper into a couple of GMs, spotlight them, spotlight their teams. And I think specifically just talk about how we got here with these two. I was going to say programs, but these aren't programs. These are franchises. These are teams. These are, moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts to this whole thing. The Denver Broncos at 10-2 are the top of the AFC right now, and the Chicago Bears are 9-3, top of the NFC. Same record as the New England Patriots and Rams, respectively, but the top of the top at the moment via tiebreakers, the number one seeds as we head into week 14. Maddie.
It's crazy.
And I guess I will say I just might have spoiled that. The New England Patriots might win. We're recording this on Monday night. The New England Patriots might win tonight, and that might make them 11-2. But at the time of recording, 10-2.
And
so,
Cody's a hater. Let's just say what it is. You're just a hater.
I will. No, I'm just.
You're hating. You're hating, which is fine. Hate away. That's my first rodeo, but we're talking about the other two top teams. But I think that their paths are pretty interesting to get to this point. And I think that bringing these two up, even aside from the Patriots narrative, because we'll talk about the Patriots in a future episode, we'll definitely spotlight their situation, because I think their situation is a little bit more unique, where I think the Broncos and the Bears have a lot of commonalities. There's a lot of similarities you see through their processes, and who they have at the helm building these teams have similarities, not necessarily of their background or the GM tree or whatever, but kind of what they've done and what they've been given the chance to do as a team builder. So I think you offered these two up for the spotlight earlier when we were getting ready for the show, and I think you kind of nailed it, because there's a lot to talk about that reflects on maybe our personal philosophies on team building, our philosophies on winning in the NFL, and what these guys do right and what they've done wrong, when you kind of look at it through how we, kind of implant our bias on team building.
I think the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about these two teams was a question I posed in our text thread, which was, can these teams be long-term teams? Can these teams be a team that turns into, I don't know if you want to say like turns into the Packers or turns to the Patriots, or these teams that are long lasting, but maybe they turn into the Seahawks, where they last a decade and they're in power for a decade, where you think back to maybe why I'm asking this question is we saw one season, right, from the Chicago Bears with Mitchell Trubisky, where they won 12 games back in 2018. We saw a 3-year window where the Broncos go out and they get DeMarcus Ware and they get Peyton Manning and they make these moves. They get Emmanuel Sanders and yada, yada. Yeah. And it flashed and it worked. And then for the Bears, it's been, since Jay Cutler, it's been Trubisky and Fields, and now it's Caleb Williams. And for the Broncos, after Peyton Manning, it was Travis Simeon, and Case Keenum got a contract after he brought the Vikings to the NFC Championship. And Drew Lock was their draft pick, and Russell Wilson was the guy they traded for. And they've missed on quarterbacks, as well as missing on coaches, right? You've missed on Vance Joseph in Denver, Vic Fangio in Denver, Nathaniel Hackett for 1 year in Denver. John Fox, who was with the Broncos that year that they brought Peyton Manning in, was with Chicago after Mark Trestman, who sucked, right? John Fox had a .292 win percentage with the Bears. Matt Nagy brought them to that 2018 season where they won 12 games, and everyone thought the Bears were back until Trubisky fell back on his face. Matt Eberflus. The interesting thing I'll say here, and the reason I think both these teams make a lot of sense to talk about here, is George Patton, their GM, came in 2021. Ryan Poles came in 2022. Ben Johnson, offensive mastermind with the Bears, they just brought in this year. 3 consecutive seasons, top 5 in scoring with the Lions. Sean Payton, who they brought in 2023, had 5 consecutive seasons, top 5 in scoring offense with the Saints before he decided to retire after that last botched season. Neither of these teams have made the playoffs in the last 5 years. In the previous 5 years to these guys joining the team as the head coach. Neither of these teams have won the division since 2015 for the Broncos, 2018 for the Bears, and or It's been a decade since either of them have been to the conference championship. Broncos 2015 when they won the Super Bowl, and of course the Bears in 2010. I guess my first thought is initially when I look at these two rosters is this, Maddie. Without talking about draft picks or trades or anything really past the stuff, giving the GMs too much credit. Sean Payton attached to a quarterback that fits him, Bo Nix.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Johnson attached to a quarterback who seemingly fits him, and Caleb Williams is the answer.
Yeah, that's the simplest way to put it. Is they found the through line. We talked this on GMing team building 101. At the end of the day, it's the alignment between ownership to team building to head coach to quarterback. If you can get that lined up, you'll be ahead of 75% of the teams in the league. And it seems as if these teams were, they were flailing a bit because there was a turnover. You mentioned some of the turnover at GM and turnover at head coach and quarterback, all these places. The thing that they have similarly between the two is both Poles and Patton were allowed to fail for these franchises. And I think a lot can be said with that because now we know that the ownership GM connection is there because there's trust. They weren't fired immediately. I mean, think of the turnover that Patton has overseen since 2021. We're talking about the bringing on of Sean Payton, who's Hall of Fame coach, and cutting $100 million off the salary with Russell Wilson and Randy Gregory when he brought on the faith that he showed Payton to then get Bo Nix at 12 overall. You're seeing the through line of being on the same page there, and I think this year with the hiring of Ben Johnson, we're seeing that from ownership to quarterback with the Bears because they you saw the trust in Poles with the autonomy that ownership gave him to make that massive trade, to go back to the well when it didn't seem to work right away, to not panic on Caleb Williams after a year with Matt Eberflus. There was trust in two of the four. Caleb Williams, he's number one overall pick with a bullet, so you're going to trust him. Now the quarterback, I mean, the coach connection is there. You're seeing the patchwork happen, the through line happen from ownership to quarterback of both of these franchises, and those are the ones that you're comfortable projecting success from year to year. It's not a flash in the air. And on top of it, with the Broncos, we've now seen 2 years of it look good with this through line, this connection from ownership to quarterback, and it'll be up to the Bears to repeat it because we have seen teams fall foe of the soft schedule. The parity in the NFL is as best as it's ever been. It's as liquid as it's ever been, and it's because of these schedulings and all these things, this turnover. So they have to do it 2 years in a row. But I've seen enough from, again, the ownership to the quarterback standpoint where you could at least feel confident that these teams aren't bad, which puts you ahead of most teams in the NFL.
After Peyton Manning left the Broncos, this is where I'm going to pivot this to and focus on giving flowers to George Payton because when Manning left Denver, you could have thought, like, why can't you build up momentum? They still had Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. That was, they had C.J.
Brock
Anderson.
Osweiler.
They went through Bosweiler and Paxton Lynch, right? But Vance Joseph had this team go 5-11, 6-10. Vic Fangio 7-9, 5-11, 7-10 in 2021, which was George Payton's first year. That's when they gave up on John Elway. Was after that last or the 2020 season. 2021 was Fangio, and that was George Payton's first year. They let go of Fangio and Drew Lock, and he brings in Nathaniel Hackett in 2022. And it only lasts 15 weeks, right? That was post Nathaniel Hackett OC in Green Bay. That was the gold zone with Aaron Rodgers.
They thought they were getting Rodgers and Hackett. At the time, that was the play. They struck out on Rodgers.
They struck out on Rodgers and they got Russ. And the theory, and you can hindsight this because it's worked. The reason you can hindsight this is you can give George Payton his flowers because that was his first year as a GM. He said, all right, I saw what Fangio did. We got to get him out of here. We're going to bring in an offensive mind. Let's bring in a quarterback. They obviously tried and struck out with Rodgers, but they brought in Russ, who they thought was a good play with Seattle, ended up not being a great play, obviously. But the theory, and what I can tie it back to, is he was an assistant GM with the Minnesota Vikings he was director of player personnel starting in 2007, but he was with
Spielman guy.
He was with Spielman before Miami as the pro personnel guy.
Yeah.
Then he's the director of player personnel. Then he's the assistant GM. He was the VP of player personnel. He's with Spielman all the way through in Minnesota. And what they do at the end there, during his time in Minnesota, was they went and got Kirk Cousins. And that was a free agent play, right? You go get Kirk Cousins. It worked in Minnesota, right?
Yep.
But that's my connection here is you get an offensive mind, you get a free agent quarterback, this thing's going to work. The flowers I'm going to give George Payton is the ability to pull plug after 1 year.
Yeah.
This didn't work. Done. Ship it.
15 games.
Cut Russ, cut Hackett. And then you go out and you get Sean Payton off the TV, off the media, off doing what we're doing, right? He's on Fox, doing pregame and stuff. And Sean Payton's able, after 1 year, to go get Bo Nix, pick up Bo Nix, and you let him make the move. That's the flowers I'll give George Payton. I loved that play, being able to pivot off of Nathaniel Hackett, because that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Your first year in, all right, it's easy to fire Vic Fangio, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy to fire your first option.
Your first hire, yeah.
So I think that was massive. And then he comes in, obviously. The draft picks have been good since 21. In the first round, they took Pat Surtain. They didn't have a pick in 22 or 23 because of Russ. And then you have Bo Nix. And then, of course, Jahdae Barron this year. So I think the picks have been well in the first round. The second round, there's a couple of hits as well. Nick Bonito, of course, a stud. And then Marvin Mims, who's been, honestly, when you look at Pro Bowlers for both these teams, I'm not going to dig into this too deep right now, but as far as Pro Bowls go for both of these teams, Nick Bonito 1, Marvin Mims has 2.
As a special teamer, yeah.
And that's as a special teamer. And then, of course, Pat Surtain has 3 from 2021. That's it. That's the only Pro Bowlers that have been drafted by the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, it's time to. But you're the thing about the Broncos is that you're seeing not only those Pro Bowlers emerge, whether they get the selection or not. You're seeing the player worth that. But what more importantly is you're starting to see them emerge from the positions that change things around. Right. Nick Bonito was a find a few years back. He's gotten the extension, but again, you got the find at edge rusher. And now, for better or worse, whether he's a Pro Bowl or not on paper, Bo Nix is going to be a perennial all-star caliber quarterback. So not only are you starting to get those players, but you're starting to see those players come about at the most important positions. Right. So we can only expect better things when those are the positions that have the checkbox. And now you're seeing similar things happen with the Bears. Could quarterback be fixed? Seems like it's definitely on that way. Edge rushing, there he won away. Josh, Sweat's been good. So they start checking the boxes in those important positions. It's just tough to bet against those teams.
Interesting thing with the Bears that kind of came across, and obviously this is well-known knowledge, but it's kind of this thing like in the moment, and things are moving so quickly. The coaches is gone, the quarterbacks are gone, and you kind of move past it. As you look at the last couple of coaches, I should say, John Fox inherited Jay Cutler, right? Then he drafted Trubisky. He's fired. Matt Nagy inherited Trubisky, drafted Fields, fired. Eberflus inherited Fields, drafted Williams, fired. Ben Johnson has now inherited Caleb Williams. And so they've just been throwing coach darts at the wall for the last decade, right? They've had literally 5 coaches in the last, rough decade, if you count Tressman's. I'm counting that because Lovie Smith was 2012 when he departed. So it's really been 13 years, but you get the gist. And I find it interesting that, even if you followed the coattails or the vine this whole summer, the theory was that this is going to flop. This is going to fail so miserably.
The pattern was there, yeah.
Because Caleb Williams is an asshole, and Caleb Williams isn't going to learn the Ben Johnson thing, and Ben Johnson's aging 10 years during training camp. And you're like, well, hindsight, now it's not probably not the easiest thing to pick up a new playbook in your second year. And it's probably not the
Mhm.
easiest thing for a coach to be like, yo, Caleb, pick this whole thing up, rapido, and expect it to work. It's worked
Right.
magically, but it also helps you with weapons around you when you hit on guys like Caleb and Rome. Colson Loveland even hasn't really erupted yet. And the plays that has happened and now this offensive line hasn't been elite. Don't get me wrong here. But the moves that were made by Ryan Poles this offseason to go out and get Drew Dahlman, go out and get Jonah
Joe
Jackson,
Tooney.
Joe Tooney, and
Mhm.
they drafted Darnell Wright in 2023. And Braxton
Yeah.
Jones was a big hit in the 5th round in 2022, all under Poles. And remember how bad this offensive line was and has been the last previous couple of years. And
Right.
they built and built and built it. And the defensive line, you go out and get Montez Sweat a couple of years ago, right? You draft for upside in Austin Booker. I think they've done the right thing. They've had the right process
Mhm.
in all of these things, predominantly. So I thought that was interesting, just more than anything, the hate for Ben Johnson coming in and the way that Poles and him, not Poles and him, but the way that Poles has understood the assignment,
Mhm.
I guess, more than anything. And I can't really give Johnson much credit for much of anything, really, outside of maybe saying like, oh, I like Colston Loveland. That could have happened. Luther Burden's going to fit like a Monroe. We haven't really seen it yet. He's had flashes and stuff, but it's kind of tough, you know?
Yeah, but the thing that's really important, again, it's just that continuity because clearly the relationship was there between Johnson and Poles right away because not only did Poles understand, like, obviously the assignment in the offseason was improve the offensive line. That's as easy as you can make it. But how they were going to go about that could have come in different ways. Could have happened different, all these different, you could skin a cat many different ways or whatever. He was pretty proactive in how he was going to improve that offensive line, and it was through some explosion in the middle, as opposed to and letting you know their outside guys kind of mature. You mentioned being drafted since 2022, mature out there. Let's get some more explosion in the middle. Let's get some experience in the middle, and that's really been how they've adopted to the Ben Johnson run style in year one. Now we're seeing it with Swift and Monangai. You're just seeing the offense look exactly kind of how Ben Johnson probably envisioned. And that comes because Poles is good at his job, patient enough, and was able to connect with that coach right away because he's had to adapt. Now, he did get very lucky. You can't talk about Ryan Poles and not talk about how fortunate he was because the passing on Harbaugh, Johnson, Belichick, there was all these Vrabel, these massive names out 2 years ago, and he decided to stick with Eberflus. Whether that be ownership or polls, you depends on who you hear from, who you
Whether that
talk
was
to.
right or wrong to begin with.
Right. That's neither here nor there. The truth is what happened. And what happened was they let Eberflus take year one of Caleb Williams, and he just got so lucky that Ben Johnson was still there, was able to mature one more year as a play caller, coach overall in Detroit, go through the season that they went through, get battle tested, learn probably a ton in just that one extra year going back with the Lions. And he just got lucky that he was able to get him a year after because had he got gobbled up and they picked, this year's flavor of the month, this cycle's, hype beast that doesn't really have much foundation, who knows where they'd be, but they were able to still get their guy a year later. So he did get lucky, but through the attrition, through check, good picks, bad picks, learning. Both of these guys were able to do this by ownership. And I think that's massive when you want to build a team. When it starts with ownership to the team builder has to have that trust. You have to let him try things, fail, try different things. You talk about Patton's ability to move around from a free agent style to get rid of the free agent, to let the coach pick it from the draft. We have the right guy. It's being able to adapt, and you only learn how to adapt through some failings. Both these guys were afforded the chance to try, fail, try again, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor because they did seem to build that bridge now that two franchises should be able to operate. And another important thing when talking about Patton and Poles is the lineage, the tree that they come from also lends support that these guys know a thing or two. You understand what I'm saying? Like, these weren't like, where do they come from? Let's look at it. Well, Ryan Poles comes from Scott Pioli. That's a guy I'm glad he learned from. That's a tree I'll bet on. Where did Patton come from? Rick Spielman. Again, Rick Spielman's not loved by the NFL right now, but you and I love Rick Spielman.
Well, he's an
We
old
believe
man.
in the
He's past his prime. He's out. Like that happens.
fair enough. But in terms of building a team, we are very pro
Yes.
Rick Spielman on this show. So I'm going to give again the benefit of doubt to to George Patton. These guys get they get developed through same thing as coaching trees. We love the McVay tree, the Shanahan tree. I read this whole book about the Shanahan tree. Fascinating book. Trees also matter when it comes to learning and team building. And you trust both of these guys' paths where they are. They were allowed to succeed, fail, and now they look like they have what they need in place to succeed over the long term's tough to say because what's long term in professional sports, but predictably over the next 3 years, we can expect both these teams to be there.
I think there's been a couple of interesting additions, and we'll get out of here in just about a minute. But a couple of movements that they have made as far as free agency trades that I think are interesting. Of course, both teams have hit on late picks. The draft, right? Both teams have done well, right? Whether it's Austin Booker, we talked about, or Kyle Monaghan, the running back Buckers, or on the Broncos side, whether it's Quinn Miners in the 3rd round or Jonathan Cooper in the 7th round or the starting center in the 5th round. Like hitting on those guys is always going to be important. As I mentioned with the Pro Bowlers for the Broncos, the Bears, Ryan Poles has never drafted a Pro Bowler yet. Now, there's going to be some Pro Bowlers. I think Rome's going to get one. Caleb's going to get one, yada, yada, yada. But he's never drafted a Pro Bowler. So I think my overarching point with that is that these aren't instant successes out of the draft either. Like we'll see, obviously, like you'll have guys that'll win Rookie of the Year and guys will be instant contributors to your team. But neither of these rosters have experienced that off the hoof. Just boom, in, bang. Patrick Surtain, yes, that's the one guy. Marvin Mims wasn't the receiver that we kind of expected him to be the Brandon Cooks for the Broncos for Sean Payton. That was his first ever draft pick, right? That he's credited with. Nick Bonito wasn't there when Sean Payton was there. Like it was early. Benito's great. I don't think anybody expected Bonito. I love
to
Bonito.
be this.
I didn't expect Bonito to be what Bonito is. Point is, when you move on to free agency and you look at the spend that these guys have had the last 2 years, right? To have success in 2025, what did you spend in 2024 and 2023? One player combined on both teams has been paid more than $15 million per year. That was Deo Adenabo, the defensive lineman for the Chicago Bears. The only guy they've spent high on, right? What do we talk about every single offseason? Who spent the most money? Jacksonville spent this. Minnesota spent this. Philadelphia spent this. Every single year, that's the big number here. But when you look at these two rosters, what they did, right? The Denver Broncos, they let Justin Simmons walk. He goes to Atlanta in 2024. They bring in Brandon Jones. They save $1 million. They let Javonte Williams walk in 2025. They bring in J.K. Dobbins. They save $1 million. They need help on the back end. They go get Talanoa Huafanga from San Francisco. He's been a savage. They err a little bit on Evan Ingram. He hasn't really done a lot. They paid him a lot of money this year. Dre Greenlaw was a value at the time. He's in. But it's done well. And I think that that's been one of the biggest key cogs. And there's one player that I really want to talk about who I think has been the best value of the year. It's Nahshon Wright. Nahshon Wright, who has kind of popped onto the screen the last couple of weeks, I guess you could say, had a big interception a couple of weeks ago against Minnesota. But Nahshon Wright is a cornerback. And these are big things because when you look at the Chicago Bears and the injury with Kyler Gordon, with Jalen Johnson, they've both been banged up the last 2 years. Nahshon Wright, the Bears, this was literally $1 million this offseason, right? Less money than Devin Duvernay, who got 1 point, who's had a very good season as a kick returner. Olamide Zaccheaus, who's been a very good plug-in at wide receiver, while Luther Burden seemingly hasn't been prepared or ready. $1.1 million for Nahshon Wright for the Chicago Bears this offseason. Nahshon Wright has 5 interceptions on the year.
Right. He stepped up big time.
54 tackles. Massive. That's a massive thing. You don't make that play and you're like, well, you know what? We'll just We think Za Frazier, who is similar athleticism, right? That's their rookie 5th rounder from UTSA. We saw him last year at the combine, like 6'2", 6'3", bigger guy. Let's just bet on Za getting ready or being ready, right? No, you go out, you get the free agent, $1.1 million on Nahshon Wright. Nahshon Wright, you sign him back, and he's broken out. And that's like a big part of just it's a cheap play, right? But it's a cheap play that you can do because you tried on Keenan Allen. You traded for Keenan Allen. You dipped out. You let him walk, go to the Chargers, right? You moved off of Tevin Jenkins. You moved off of Darrell Taylor. You moved off some other guys that opened up some money so you could make this play here. You could draft this guy here. And guess what? We got an extra $1 million. We can bring Nahshon Wright in. Boom. And all of a sudden, late in the season, it's important. It's a big piece because of injuries and other situations. I just think like a multitude of reasons across both sides. You look at the Broncos side of the field. I talked about the Justin Simmons thing. You get Brandon Jones. You move up Javonte. You get J.K. Dobbins. You move off Lloyd Cushenberry, and you can bring in some offensive linemen, or you can draft an offensive lineman. You might miss on some things too. You draft Devon
You got to take
Taylor.
chances.
You trade him for picks to the Saints. You traded for Zach Wilson for 1 year. Shipped him back out at the boom, gone. Right? Things like this, like you instantly trade Jerry Jeudy. Why? Because he's not the answer. Because we need to go try and see if we can get Pat Bryant some more reps. We need to make a move to get Troy Franklin. You move up in the draft to get a Troy Franklin. You move up in the draft to get an RJ Harvey. Being aggressive on guys that are starting to be very important. And when we think of these two teams, we don't think of the Broncos as being like the most talented wide receiver room, but they're getting the job done. We don't think of the Bears as like, look at this backfield of DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monaghan. But what they do last week against the Philadelphia Eagles on Black Friday football, all of a sudden, it's double workhorse, $120 and a touchdown for both guys. Both guys get 18-plus carries because they can, because your offensive line's put together, because people are scared of your receivers on the back end. It's the Eagles. Did the Eagles win the Super Bowl recently?
I think they did recently win, right? Was it last year? Did they beat
are the Eagles at the top of the NFC standings if they beat the Chicago Bears?
Yep, number 1 seed.
Okay. Pretty big game. And you showed up and you ran down their throat. I think I'm just very impressed with what both sides have done. Yeah, again, I think both of these teams can last. Why? Because I think Sean Payton, he's getting up there in age. I'm more scared of the Chicago Bears long term because I think there's volatility in the NFC North. And I think in the Denver side, like Kansas City's still Kansas City. The Chargers are building. And as much as they have injuries and stuff, like they're going to always be good.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens with Tom Brady and the Raiders. But I think both these teams are set up for the future.
Yeah. And when you just take some of the components, like the Bears are just better. Like they just have better weapons. They have the younger coach. They have the quarterback with a similar a similar like pedigree, but way more upside. You would even 2 years in be able to clearly tell that Caleb Williams has upside that Bo Nix doesn't have. So it's just like all the things that you like about Denver, you can love about Chicago.
There it is. Another episode down. A little GM spotlight on George Paton's success in Denver and Ryan Poles' success in Chicago. The two number 1 seeds right now in the NFC and the AFC. Two teams on the rise with young quarterbacks, high-powered offenses that can build in the draft, build in free agency, build in trades, and build with cohesion from top to bottom. The number 1 important thing in team building and NFL team success. I'm not Matty Cume. I'm Cody Carpentier, joined by my man Matty Cume every single week. Tap in, lock into the draft rankings. Click that like button. Click subscribe. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll see you.
Peace.